After my castle tutorial, a lot of people wanted to see how to create the full final scene. So today we're going to look at that, how to create a full fantasy scene in Blender. This video is sponsored by MSI. Check it out. Don't forget to check out my free material pack with over 20 free materials, and all my courses and products are also on Gumroad if you'd like to check those out as well. If you're wondering why my viewport's so fast, it's because I'm using the MSI sponsored WS76 workstation computer. We'll talk about that more later. We'll be going through the entire process, however I am going to fast forward through some of the repetitive or tedious parts. So first up, what I'm going to do is add a wall. So using the extra objects add-on, which is included in Blender for free, you just need to enable it. You can add a wall factory here, and this will give you a bunch of settings so that you can go ahead and create a castle wall, allowing you to adjust the width and the length and the height and the size of the bricks. And in my castle tutorial, I go in great detail of all these individual settings. But for now, we're just going to kind of use some of the basic settings, and I'm going to tick openings to add a window, and then I'm going to click repeat to add that, and then I'm going to add some length to the wall here just to give us a nice long wall with some windows to work with. Keep playing with your wall until you have something you're happy with. You're going to want it to be kind of long because we're going to wrap this around into a circle, and what we're going to do is add a modifier. So we're going to add the simple deform modifier, and we're going to change that to bend and the Z axis, and then under the parameters down here you can actually adjust that length, and what that'll allow you to do is kind of close that little gap that appears at the end. Now if you tab into edit mode here, what we can actually do is select these window edges here, and if you hit Control plus a bunch, you'll grab the whole brick, and then we can go into our top view, and what we're going to do is scale in the window and push it out a little bit, and that's just going to give us a nice bevel which will be attractive at a distance with a little bit of contrast. Next up, let's go ahead and add a bevel modifier to give our brick a more natural look. I also tabbed into edit mode, selected random, and you can actually search for randomized transform, and that'll kind of move your bricks all around in a little bit of a different order. But after you've kind of gotten your brick somewhere you're happy with, what we're going to do is just go ahead and duplicate that process a couple times. So I'm just going to create a couple variants so that I can have some towers. And then what we can do is just begin duplicating these towers and moving them around. Now there's really no wrong or right way to do this. Just keep moving it around until you get something that you're happy with. Now the hills are pretty simple. I just went ahead and added a rounded cube, selected a quadrosphere, and then you see this little option here for arc, and that's kind of the subdivisions, and I just upped that a couple times to give it a little bit more geometry. What that's going to do is give us a little sphere, and we can go ahead and scale that way up, and I'm just going to scale that up to fit the castle and delete the bottom here. So let's go ahead, and now that we've deleted the bottom half, we can scale from the origin. So we'll just move this up quite a bit, and I'm going to make this quite large and just drop this down so that it fits under the castle. And you'll notice we're having some viewport issues. So you can actually go over here in the camera properties and change that kind of end property there so that you're able to see the whole hill. That's kind of something important to do when you're working with large scenes like this. And after you've done that, I'm just going to go ahead and move around and keep duplicating some towers. Now I'm making my castle kind of like it's been there forever and it's falling over in all different directions, but you can kind of place your towers wherever you want if you want a more traditional castle where it's kind of straight up with a fortress. And you'll notice I'm not worrying about the placement of these towers in the ground because they're all behind this middle tower with the camera view. So next what we're going to do is just tab here into edit mode. You'll notice that the wall factory add-on kind of leaves gaps in the brick. So we're just select everything, set it to individual origins, and just scale that up just a tiny bit, and you'll see that it fills those gaps. Now for lighting, I'm just going to go ahead and add a sky texture to the world, and you can play with the settings here. I set my sun size to 10, and my sun intensity to 1.5, and then after that I just played with the sun elevation and the sun rotation until I got something I was happy with. I wanted to kind of hit it from the side so that I could see some shadows and add some shape to these objects. Now I want to create some taller towers, so go ahead, create another wall factory. I'm going to fast forward through this part because it's just the same thing over and over, but this time we're going to add another modifier so that we have a bit more control over the height of the tower. So what we're going to do is we're going to add an array modifier here, and then we can go ahead and adjust the Z axis to 1, and then we can turn that count up and down to make it as tall or short as we want, and then we can go ahead and place these around the scene as well. Now for the grass texture, I just downloaded a grass texture from the internet. You can find them all over or on my Gumroad if you'd like to look. Polyhaven has some for free. And then I just deleted everything but the base texture because I didn't want to worry about rendering. And then I just went ahead and scaled that up from the window view. Next up, I wanted to add some water, and the water is actually pretty simple. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a plane, and we're just going to scale this way up. It's going to have to be pretty massive to kind of fit at the angle in this scene. And we'll add a basic material to it, kind of pick a blue material there, turn the reflectivity up just so we can see our castle in there, and we want to add a bit of variance. So first what we'll do is we'll add a Veroni texture here, and we're going to plug in a Moosegrave texture into the vector, and then you can play with the scale of both of these and you'll get this kind of warbly color. And then what we can do is go ahead and plug that into the bump map to give us a bit of visual variety there on our water. And we can plug that into the bump down here on the principled node. And if you want, you can also plug that into the roughness if you want a tiny bit of variance there. So let's add some roofs to our towers. Now, again, I cover this process in great detail in the castle video, but I'm going to give you a quick overview. I'm going to create a plane here and rotate it. Then I'm going to go ahead and add a solidify modifier to get some thickness. And I'm also going to add a subdivision surface so we can kind of create this teardrop shape when I scale in these top two vertices. And that kind of gives us a little kind of medieval shingle look. So we'll just go ahead and move this down so that the origin point's here for easy rotation. And then we can begin adding some array modifiers. And you'll see that we're just offsetting them on the y-axis and then the x-axis. And I'm actually going to create two array modifiers, one for the x-axis and one for the z-axis. And then I just bump the y-axis forward on one of them so that they don't have any overlap in that way. And that'll give us that kind of folded shingle look. Now we're going to move fast through this next part because I cover this in great detail in my castle tutorial as well. But what we're going to do is add a Bezier circle and then a curve modifier to our array. We'll select that circle, which will wrap the array around that circle. And then what we can do is we can go ahead and rotate our shingles because I actually made them wrong side up for this situation. So you can go ahead, rotate those around 180 degrees. And then if we tab into edit mode here, as you can see that we can scale this curve and adjust the size of what our roof radius will be. But first we need to take that first array with the X and we need to go ahead and turn that count up so that it moves around the entire circle. And then we can scale that in and out until we get a size we're happy with. And if you hit Control T, you can actually rotate this inwards and outwards to give us that kind of pointed look. Now, if you parent the Bezier circle to the roof, you can move it around and then place it onto your tower. And then you can parent that to your tower. And then you'll be able to duplicate that and move that around your scene. I'm just going to fast forward as I'm just duplicating those towers and placing them around. It's a lot of trial and error and figuring out what looks good, so it can take some time. I do want to slow down for 1 minute though and point out that I have this tower that I curved kind of coming out of the middle tower. And the easy way to do that is to grab your tower object and add a lattice modifier to it, size that lattice to the object, go ahead, divide that lattice a few times, and then you can just tab into edit mode here and kind of rotate, and that'll just kind of deform the overall tower. And then what I did here at the top is just to give some kind of visual differentiation of the tower. I just grabbed some of those top bricks in edit mode wireframe, and I just went ahead and scaled those out a bit just to give us a little bit of depth on the top of the tower. Next up, to add a door, I'm going to add a plane again, and I'm just going to scale this and rotate it to be kind of in front of the middle of the castle. I'm going to add some modifiers here. Let's add a subdivision surface modifier, and I'm going to add an edge loop there and drag that down to kind of give the top of the door a rounded look. And I'm going to go ahead and scale that up until it's about the size of the door that I want. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add a solidify modifier and just make that a little bit thick. And then we can add another modifier after that to bend the door. So we'll go ahead, add a bend, and then we'll set that axis to Z, and then you can kind of bend that until you get an angle you're happy with. And we can just shift that back on the Y axis to fit into our castle. Let's talk a bit about our sponsor. The WS76 workstation is built for those who need every ounce of power you can get from your computer. I measured thermals during my render test and I was impressed at how well it did. It has an Intel i9 processor, an NVIDIA RTX A5000 graphics card, support for Omniverse drivers, plenty of RAM for large scenes, Wi-Fi 6E, 99.9 watt per hour battery life. This is a top of the line workstation for professionals. If you're interested in something cheaper for a hobby, I'll list some of those in the description as well, as MSI has a wide range of options that accommodate all creatives. To begin adding the grass, I'm going to just use these 4 cylinders and put them in this grass collection up here, and then I gave each one a different kind of shade of green so that they'll kind of create a variant from afar. So we can grab our hill and we'll actually add a basic particle system. We're going to select the hair system there, and then what we're going to do is name that grass to keep it organized. We can go down to the render as, select collection, put our grass collection, which has our 4 little cylinders in it, and then we can just scale that up until they're visible. Now we're going to need to adjust the rotation to match. So we can take this rotation and set it to velocity or normal, tap into edit mode here, and we can just kind of rotate until those are all correct. Now if we tick on the advanced option, we can adjust rotation, play with the phase until we get a little bit more randomness. So I don't want this to appear on everything for just rendering time. So I'm going to go into edit mode, assign a group, and I'm going to assign the front half, which is visible by the camera, to that group called grass. And we come down here in the field weights of our particle systems and add that there to the front, and you'll see that it only adds grass to the front, so we don't have to render as many particles. So I'm going to scale that down a bit. We're going to turn on children, and I'm just going to leave mine to the default 100, but you'll notice they're all clumped up, and we can fix that by expanding our radius here, which will expand the children radius. And with that, let's take a quick look at the rendered view and see how that's looking. And I think this is looking pretty great, so we're ready to move on. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate all of these hills. Now, it's worth mentioning that I decided just to brute force it with the particles and just duplicate all these hills around. But if you want to optimize your scene more, Blender Guru actually has a really cool donut tutorial where he talks about rendering an object as an image and then placing that in the background to save render times. Or you can do it as I did here if your computer can handle it and just render all the particles out on every single object. The reason I did it this way is because I wanted to do a mist pass later that I'll walk you through how to do, and I wanted to have an actual natural fall off over the objects. Like I said, feel free to check out the Blender Guru tutorial if you want to learn how to kind of optimize it and just use an image detector for those background hills. As I mentioned, we're going to render with a mist pass, and if you drag the mist here, you can see it gives us this grayscale. So we'll grab a mix node on here, and we'll drag the mist into the factor and the image into the top slot there. And what that's going to do is make that bottom color appear over our image based on the mist pass information. And if you want to adjust that more, you can add a color ramp and you can drag that over the mist pass, and you can play with these sliders to kind of crush that. Now you can go ahead and play with this. I spent quite a bit of time playing with the colors and kind of the contrast. I didn't really do anything super fancy there. We'll talk about how I composite the clouds a bit later. So play until you find something you're happy with. After that, I wanted to break up the water in the scene, so I went ahead and imported an object. Now this is for my short film, so I chose to do a watermelon as that's a theme in my short film. For you, I recommend a rock or grass or weeds or lily pads or maybe some ruins or anything like that. Get creative with it. You probably don't want to do watermelons because it might not make much sense out of context of my short film. So I'm just going to go ahead and add that watermelon here in the scene and kind of scale it up. And I have a clever little trick I did to create ripples around that in the water. So let's take a look at that. We're going to zoom in on our object here. What we're going to do is we're going to add a curved circle. And then what you can do is under the curve settings, we'll go ahead and scale it up. And then we can adjust the bevel option down here, give it a little bit of depth. And then what we're going to do is actually convert it to a mesh. So we'll convert that to a mesh, and then we can scale out another ring there. And I'm going to join those two together and tab into edit mode. We'll do the same things as the brick. We'll do a randomize transform and just bump that up a bit, and that'll give it this kind of distorted look. And then what we can do is add a basic material, and I'm just going to create a little emission material there, and I'm going to turn that white. So if we zoom in here on render view, you can see that we're starting to get where we want, but they're a little too far out. So we're going to grab both of these, move them down on the Z axis, and that's almost going to give us a ripple-like water effect. And then what we can do is we can join these objects and grab that and then just move this around. Now I decided to create like a little path leading up to my little hill here, almost as if they had to kind of hop across this path. Then after that, I just kind of began randomly pacing them around the scene until I felt I kind of had just some good visual contrast just to break up the visual monotony of the water. Good to take a quick view of the render to see where we're at, and we're ready to begin the castle material. So we'll take an ambient inclusion node and plug that in to the principled node, and you can choose a color there for your castle brick. Next, what we're going to do is take some noise texture. We're going to bump that scale way up, and we're going to use this to add a little bit of bump to our stone. So we'll add a bump node, and we'll grab that factor, put that into the height, and plug that into the normal. And you can adjust that strength until you find something you're happy with. I'm also going to take the color and put that in the roughness to get us a bit of a roughness variation. To get more control over ambient inclusion, we'll add a mix RGB node in between here. And we'll leave the color into the top slot there and the ambient inclusion into the bottom slot. We'll set that factor to 1. Set it to multiply, which will put the ambient inclusion over our color. We're going to take a color ramp, put that over the ambient inclusion line, and then we can adjust that white slider to adjust how much ambient inclusion we have. Now this next part's a pretty cool trick. We're going to grab all of our castle brick objects here, and we're going to tab into edit mode with all of them selected. Then we're going to press A to select everything. We're going to go to unwrap, and then we're going to do from active quads. Now if we come back into our shader, we'll add a color ramp. We'll set it to constant, and then that allows us to get kind of a harsh edge there. We're going to search for a geometry node, and down here you'll see we have a random per island, which is the UV island. If we drag that into the color for ambient inclusion, you can see that it's giving a random color based on this color ramp. So now what you can do is just go ahead and add as many colors as you want in here and the choice of colors you want. You probably don't want a bright blue castle, and then after you're done with that, you can do the same exact thing to the roof, and then I just went ahead for a red roof. Again, you probably don't want to match the same colors I have, but that just allows you to kind of quickly add some randomness per brick and per shingle. And if we take a quick render view, we can see things are looking pretty good here. Let's add a little flag to the top of our tower. So we'll just zoom in here to our tower, and we're going to add a little cylinder. And let's go ahead and turn down the resolution on that cylinder since it's so far away, it doesn't matter. And then we can tab into top view to kind of get this into place after we scale it down, make sure it's in the center of the roof. And then we can tab into edit mode and grab that top line of vertices in wireframe mode, and we'll just drag that up, and now we have a little pull. So let's add a plane for our flag. This is a fun little trick. You can grab the plane here, and we're going to rotate it 90 degrees on the x-axis. We'll just move this up and center it onto our pole. Make sure that's all in line. And then if we tab into edit mode here and just add a loop in the middle, we can go ahead, drag that out. Then we can grab that middle vertice and just bring that back, and now we have a little flag. If you want, you can add a wave modifier to that, but in rendered view, this is looking pretty good. I went ahead and added some stripes to my hills, again for the watermelon theme, probably something you don't want to do. But moving forward, let's look at how we can add a path, because I think that'll help break up the visual monotony of the hills. So we're going to tab into our weight paint mode here. We're going to go to weight paint, and we'll add a new group. So just a temporary group. You'll see why in a moment. We'll go into weight paint mode. Let's just draw out a path. I'm going to kind of do a little curvy path leading down to that first watermelon or rock leading up to the hill. And you can kind of just draw out that path, and we're going to use this to get rid of the grass here in a moment. So we'll go ahead, select that, grab our grass, and click remove down there, and what that'll do is remove all the particles from that section. We can take a render and see what that's looking like. We need to do some visual variety, so I'm going to go ahead, select those vertices again, and then assign a new dirt path to it. Now I just went ahead and selected a dirt material and put that in there, nothing special. Again, you can get those from Polyhaven for free, or check out my Gumroad. I have some free texture packs on there too. And this is looking good. This is giving us quite a bit of variety. Now the last step was adding in some clouds, and I actually did that really quickly just by grabbing a cloud image for free from pexels.com. All their stuff is free. And then I just did it in Photoshop because that's one I'm more used to. Added a painterly effect to the background, but you could totally just import this as images as planes in Blender and just put it in the background there if you wanted to keep it in Blender. Same thing, I grabbed some kind of fog stock footage and just mixed that in to the bottom as well. And with that, we have our final render. If you're in need of a computer to do 3D, don't forget to check out our sponsor, MSI, link in the description below. And I've also posted links to a couple different options, which I think are great options to get started. As usual, thank you for watching and follow me at Southern Shoddy on Instagram or Twitter if you'd like to keep up to date.